so I always tell people, there are people out there that are watching how you handle your problems, your adversity in life. And they watch the courage that you have in dealing with those things where you may think, oh, this is terrible and I can't get through this. Other people are watching you.
All right. Welcome to the Trauma Overhaul Podcast. I am your host, Tiffany Singleton.
And I'm your co-host, Aaliyah Simon.
And tonight we are talking about something very interesting. We're going to be talking about how do you remain motivated and move forward when life has thrown you a curveball. And who better to have that conversation with us tonight than Mr. Terry Tucker, who is an author, a motivational speaker, a survivor. And guess what else? He's also has experience with being a SWAT negotiator. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Tiffany, Aaliyah, thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yes, we are so excited to have you with us tonight.
Yes, we are. I want to jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. And I actually went to college. There you go. Hey, I stopped smoking when I was 3 years old and shot right up. So. Bad joke. But I went to college on a basketball scholarship at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. After college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. As I said, professionally, I started out at Wendy's, and then I went to work for the hospital that took care of my father and my grandmother. Then I made the major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during that experience was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I coached girls' high school basketball. I started a school security consulting business. But for the last 12 years now, I've been battling this rare form of cancer, this rare form of melanoma. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. Wow. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow.
That is so cool.
Yeah, very well-rounded, right?
Yes,
Whoa, that's incredible.
Thank you for sharing that. I would like to dive into, right now you're doing so many things at this present moment, motivational speaking and things of that nature, but you're dealing with a rare form of cancer. Talk about the mindset you have in order to continue to move forward, even though you have this cancer.
Yeah, so back in 2012, I was diagnosed with a rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melanin, the pigment in your skin. Mine has nothing to do with that. Mine's a rare form that appeared on the bottom of the feet. Mine appeared on the bottom of the feet, but it also can appear on the palm of your hands.
Wow.
And when I was told that I had this rare form in 2012, I was pretty much told that I would be dead in 2 years. They had absolutely nothing to offer me other than surgery. If the cancer was somewhere where they could cut it out, they would do that. But other than that, I would probably be dead in 2 years. So I was given a death sentence and thought, well, maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do over these last 12 years. I've had my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020. I still have tumors in my lungs that I'm treated for every 3 weeks. And I guess the answer to your question is something that I learned back when my father was dying of cancer. Back in the 1980s, my father had end-stage breast cancer. which
Mm.
for a man was incredibly rare. And they really
Mhm.
didn't know how to treat him because of this type of cancer that he had. So they told him to go home and die. And he
Wow.
lived another 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. And
Mm.
real estate, and he loved real estate. And he actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, well, when it's my turn in the barrel, so to speak, I need to have that purpose. And so I found that purpose, and it's kept me going through all the cancer, through all the surgeries, through all the treatment that I've been going through.
Mm.
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 Wow. So, upon receiving that diagnosis, how did that change your perspective on life? Because I know it was probably devastating at that moment.
Yeah, it absolutely was devastating. And I know that I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. First
Mm.
it was denial. I
Denial,
mean,
yeah.
after my dad died, I knew absolutely that I was going to have to, make sure I watched what I ate and had yearly exams and everything else that we would go along to try to prevent it. So when I got it, it was like, wait a minute, I can't possibly have it. So it was denial. And then I moved into sort of the anger phase. I
Mhm.
can't
Mm.
possibly have cancer. I've done everything
Yeah.
right in my life. And then I got to a point where our daughter was in high school when I was diagnosed. So there was sort of a bargaining with God. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
please let me live
Mm.
long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down and got depressed and sort of felt sorry for myself. But then I just got to a point where it was, this sucks, and I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I do not like the
Mm.
cards that I have been
That's
dealt,
good.
but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years now.
Wow.
Wow. I love the part that you said, embracing the suck. This sucks, but I'm
Yes.
going to embrace this. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Did that lead you to determining your life's purpose, or were you aware of what that was prior to that?
I think a lot of times when we talk about purpose, we talk about it in the singular, like
Mhm.
it's one thing.
Mhm.
And at least in my life,
Mm.
I think that word is plural, that it's purpose.
Mm.
When I was younger, I was an athlete. I loved basketball. I ate, drank, and slept basketball. And then as I got into adulthood, I think my purpose changed again to wanting to follow in my grandfather's footsteps,
Mm.
law enforcement. And then, as in all honesty, I'm probably coming to the end of my life. I think my purpose has shifted again to putting as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can with whatever
Mm.
time I have left. So, I think we would all hope that our purpose would
Yeah.
be our job or our occupation, but it doesn't have to be. Your job
Mm.
could be over here. It's what you do to pay the bills,
Mhm.
but your purpose is over here. It's to paint or to be an activist or to be a podcast
Sure.
host or whatever it is you feel is in your heart. And I'll end with this. Whenever I speak to young people, especially, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it.
Do
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
The end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Mm.
I really appreciate how you spoke about
Yeah.
purpose, because people seem to think purpose is just one thing that you're supposed to do with your life. And I love how you made it plural. And so I appreciate you saying that. The thing I heard you say was that I'm so in love with,
Mhm.
because God speaks to us in so many different ways. And so many
Yes.
people have an issue with, if they don't hear God audibly or they don't hear him in a certain way, then it's not God. It was something you said that spoke to my heart. And I was like, yes, you said you didn't hear God speak. Tell us what you did hear.
There's sort of an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So, you're right. God has never spoken to me. I have never in my life heard God speak to me directly. But I think what God does is put people in our path that start to make the same suggestion or tell us that we should do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And again, having free will, free choice to say, hey, God, it seems like you want me to do this, but I don't want to do that. I want to go over here and I want to do my own thing. And I'm smart enough, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of when people make the same suggestion over and over and over again, then I need to pay attention to that and I need to focus in on that because that, in a lot of ways, I feel is, at least in my life, how God has sort of directed me down certain paths to do certain things in my life. It's not been a direct, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to send messengers. I'm going to send people to make the suggestion to you.
Sure.
I appreciate you explaining that because, like I said, a lot of people have an issue with, oh, God didn't tell me, or their expectations. They're not hearing God's voice, so this is not of God, or what have you. But you're saying, no, God can speak to you differently depending on you. Like for me, He spoke through people.
Right.
So
that's good. Yeah. So how was your faith or your spiritual journey? Was that impacted in any way during this process?
It's interesting when I got cancer, and I guess let me back up a little bit. I've seen a lot of people sort of start down a road toward a goal or a purpose in life, and something gets in their way. That they butt up against an impediment. They can't get over it, around it, or through it, and so they quit. But we don't just quit. Now we've got to blame somebody. We've got to blame our parents or our station in life or our boss or something like that. And it's funny, when I got cancer, one of the first things people said to me was, well, who do you blame? Like, what do you mean
Wow.
who do I blame? Like, well, you must blame somebody for your cancer. And I've had all 88 genes that doctors either know of or suspect cause every form of cancer that we know about tested. And I have absolutely no mutations in any of my genes for
Whoa.
any cancer, which sort of begs the question, why did I get this rare form of melanoma? Nobody's been able to answer that question, so I don't spend a lot of time worrying
Yeah.
about that fact.
Sure.
So, but it is funny when people find out you have a faith life, they're like, oh, you got cancer. You must blame God. And I always used to joke with them. I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, hey, Terry Tucker, cancer today.
Right.
But I do believe that God has given me the strength several times along this journey where I was done. I was sure I was going to die. And at a point where I wanted to die, I was so sick of being sick that I asked to die, but he didn't take me, but he gave me the strength to continue to move forward.
Right. He was saying, Terry, you have a lot more assignments.
I'm not done with you yet. Yeah.
A lot more work to do.
yes.
That's great. How important is a support system? How was your support system during this process?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, nothing we ever do in life, we do, in a vacuum, that it's just us. I don't
That's
care,
right.
if you're Taylor Swift or whoever you are, I mean, every time you turn on the radio, it's Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift has an entire entourage, entire group of people that help Taylor Swift do what she does.
Right.
And it's the same with me. I always talk about what I call my 3 F's, which are my faith, my family, and my friends. And we've talked about my faith. I have a very strong faith in God. And, it's my wife and daughter. That's my immediate family. My 2 brothers are still alive. Actually, my mother is also still alive as well. And I'll give you kind of a funny story. So after I had my leg amputated and I had these tumors in my lungs, my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? And he said, Probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said to him, look, if the end is going to be the same, whether I take chemo or I don't, I'm still going to die. I would rather not take it. And I'd rather have as much good time as I have. I said, but I'll go home and talk to my family. So I
Mhm.
go home, and this is a funny story, but it really happened this way. And, I start telling my wife and daughter what the
Mhm.
doctor is suggesting. And my daughter's like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's three of us. It's not like we got a board here. Like so we end up sitting around the kitchen table and individually talking about how we all feel about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Am I getting outvoted for something that I didn't want to do? But I remember
Mm.
back when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And
Mhm.
as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself.
Mm.
Mm.
So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I loved my wife and daughter more than I loved myself. And in hindsight, it was the bridge that got me to the drug that I've been on for the last 3 years now. So it was the
Wow.
right thing to do. So that was the family part. And then the friends part, I'll just say this about that. There were people that I was 100% sure that if something devastating happened to me, that they would be there for me. And some of those people were like, Terry, you're a young man. You've got this terminal cancer. I can't deal with this. I have to back out of your life. And
Wow.
then there were people that I never
Mhm.
expected to be there for me that have never left my
Yep.
side in the 12
Wow.
years we've been doing this.
Mhm.
So, family and friends, in terms of support, that's absolutely gotten me through this disease.
Wow.
Wow.
That's awesome. So where do you look for inspiration and motivation? Where does that come from? Where do you find your strength?
I look at other people.
Mhm.
I'll give you a quick story. So one of the nurses that takes care of me, or was taking care of me, when I first met her, she was about 25 years old. So
Mhm.
a relatively new nurse, but she was still a nurse and she was learning how to do things on the unit where I'm treated. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in and she said, I've got this story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable telling it to you. And I didn't know how to respond to that. It was kind of like, well, I hope you decide you want to tell me that story. So over the next couple hours, she's doing her nursing duties and finally comes in and sits down and says, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon.
Wow.
And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through during your therapies and how you react to your medication, and it's pretty ugly. And she said, and then I went back in the file and I read everything you've been through. And she said, when I finished reading, I realized I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would
Mm.
have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had a positive impact on her.
That's
And so I
great.
always tell people, there are people out there that are watching how you handle your problems, your adversity
Absolutely.
in life. And they watch the courage that you have in dealing with those things, where you may think, oh, this is terrible and I can't get through this. Other people are watching you. So I find my inspiration in watching other people and how they
Mm.
handle their illness, how they handle, dealing with somebody, whether it's a family member or something like that, that has, the illness and things like that. I get my inspiration and motivation from watching those people because I think they're absolutely amazing.
Wow,
Wow.
that's incredible. And I must tell you that you have been I just meeting you, but you're an inspiration to me.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
What you have demonstrated for me is I should never complain about anything, right?
Yeah, but we're human. We complain.
I know,
I mean,
but we can't just make excuses for things, is what I'm saying. We have to still move forward, right?
Mhm.
we do, and I guess I want your audience to understand. I mean, you're both looking at me right now. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magic powers. You know? I mean, I get down, I get depressed, I feel sorry for myself. But when I do, I'm looking inward. I'm looking at, how lousy things
Absolutely.
are and how bad I feel and all that kind of stuff. And I find a real easy way to turn
Mhm,
that around
mhm.
is to go find somebody else to help. And I'm at the
That's it.
hospital every 3 weeks. So it doesn't take much to find somebody just to say hi to, or how are things going? Or do you want to
That's
have a
it.
cup of coffee? Or do you want to talk or whatever? Now all of a sudden I'm not focused on me anymore. I'm focused on somebody
That's
else and
good.
trying to make their life better. And all of a sudden my life's better as well.
That's good.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, that's right.
So, in other words, we should encourage people
Mhm,
to not be so focused on themselves
mhm,
whenever they're going through to
mhm,
help somebody else, and
mhm.
then they'll begin to feel better.
Yeah,
I love that.
that's good.
Yeah,
You
I
are
think
like dropping gems.
Yeah, right? Right, right.
I'm trying. I don't want to waste your time. So I'm trying to give,
No, no, you're doing great.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you just one quick story, if I might.
Mhm,
That
Yes.
kind of picks up on that. One of the nurses that cares for me now is a former hospice nurse. And for those of your audience who don't know what hospice is, it's end of life care. They take care of
mhm,
people at the end of their lives. And
mhm.
she recommended a book to me called Imagine Heaven.
Ooh.
And it's a book about people who have near death experiences. And there's
Mm.
so much information in that book. And two things that really hit home for me. One was that people that are born totally blind or totally deaf,
Mhm,
when they have a near death experience, they can see and they can hear. So imagine how
mm.
frustrating that must be for them, to have that and then to come back to their bodies, and live the rest of their life where they can't hear and they can't see, having had a little taste of that. But the thing that I really picked up from that book was no matter who the person saw during their near death experience, whether it was, Jesus or Allah or a saint or an angel or a friend or a relative, the one question that seemed to get asked to almost everybody was this: how do you treat my people? In other words, if you go back to, the
Ooh.
Bible with Jesus of what's the most important commandment, love your God
Mhm.
above
Mhm,
all else. And what's the
Mhm.
second? Love your neighbor
Mhm.
as yourself.
So,
That second part of the commandment, how do you treat each other? How do you develop relationships with each
that's
other?
good.
And I think that's so important. If you don't realize that we are all in this together, that it's
yes.
not about you. Nobody cares about you individually. You can't be successful by yourself, but we
Mm.
successful together. And if I'm remembered for anything in my life, I want it to be the relationships, the connections that I had with other people in my life.
Ah,
Wow.
I love it.
That's
I
awesome.
love
Look, we
it.
we can almost end the
The
show
show
on that note,
now.
right?
Yes.
You just preached the whole sermon in 3 minutes.
Uh, wow.
That's awesome. Well, he's pretty much covered.
Covered that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, in closing, Terry, what would you say to the person that wants to give up, that might find themselves in a situation that they are just severely impacted by? How would you encourage them in this moment?
I would tell them this story and hang with me because the story starts out kind of weird, but it's a true story. Happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University. There was a professor there by the name of Richter who wanted to do an experiment, and he did. He did this experiment. The experiment was with rats, and he took rats and he put them in a tank of water, and he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took the exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours.
Whoa.
Mm.
Think about that. The first time, 15 minutes. It's not like your business is going to fail or you're going to flunk a test. Your life is going to be over. And the second time around, 60 hours. which taught me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. Know we're doing the right thing. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but it's sometime down the road, more than likely, there's nothing 100%, you're probably going to get to where you want to be. And the second thing it taught me, and this is kind of the answer to your question, is that we all have a breaking point. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I
Right.
think we all have that. But that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever give ourselves credit for. We give up,
Ooh.
we give in, we stop, we quit because our brains are telling us this is uncomfortable, this hurts, I don't like this, stop doing
Mm.
it. And we listen to our brain. If that rat story taught you anything, it's how much more your physical body can handle, even when your brain's telling you, I can't do this, I want to quit, I want to give up.
I love
Keep
it.
going. It's like a marathon. It's
Mhm.
like running the marathon. And you hear people that run a marathon say they get to a point where they've hit a wall. I just can't go on any further. If you can push through that wall, just like if you can push through, I can't do this anymore, eventually you'll get that second win. And it's amazing how much further you can go once you get that.
I love it.
Thank you for that story.
Right. Wasn't
That
that
was
good?
so good.
It was
It
good.
was a great way to end the show.
Yes. So, Terry, anybody who wants to connect with you or follow you, how may they do so?
So I have a blog/website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it into your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Okay. And you're also a published author. What is the name of your book?
The book is called Sustainable Excellence: The 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life.
Awesome. All right. Y'all follow Terry, get your daily motivation, and purchase his book.
That's right.
You won't regret it. Terry, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show tonight. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us tonight.
Well, Tiffany, Aaliyah, I really enjoyed talking with you tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
You.
right. And we will have you back soon.
I appreciate it.